Hello and welcome to another video of the character animation series. In this video we'll be creating very simple walk cycles. Now walk cycles are one of the most common forms of character animations you would ever have to do. So it's probably best to learn the techniques of actually carrying out a simple walk cycle. So let's get straight into it. Alright, so let's begin our walk cycle. Now before I do that, I'm just going to go ahead and open up another window by dragging that corner and change it to the dope sheet editor, so that we can see the keys that we're working with. And then I want to change over to the action editor so that we can see the exact actions that we're creating for this character. I'm going to create a new action and I'm just going to call it a simple walk underscore cycle. And that should be it. Also, I want to change the active keying set to whole character, which means every single control of the character will have a keyframe inserted when I press I. And I think that's about it. That should be the setup. Alright, so the first pose I want to create is the contact pose. So let's go ahead and create that. So for the contact pose, what you want to have is you want to have the back foot go back and the front foot go front, obviously. They've got to be at the furthest point. And the legs are obviously hovering up in the air for no reason, so we can't let that happen. So we want to pull the I want to pull the hips down a little bit. About that much should be okay. And now for the back foot, you want to have the heel going up like that. The back heel going up. Back heel going up. And then move this back so that it's almost, the leg is almost extended. Same goes to here. So instead of having the toe go up, you just want to rotate like that and make sure that the leg is almost at its full. Well, yeah, it doesn't have to be. You can have a little bit of an angle like that. Okay, so they're the furthest. That's good. So that pretty much sets up the legs. Now, another trick when you're creating walk cycles is you want to have the arms swing in the opposite direction of the legs. So what I mean by that is, let's just pose a hand by the side like that. And if I go to the side, you can see that this leg is going back. So his left leg is going back. So his left hand has to go in the opposite direction. It has to go front. And maybe I can just add in a little bit of a bend there. Okay. And there we have pretty much our basic pose. And now what I want to do is I want to copy that. I want to try and copy that pose of the hand to the other side. So I just select these three, hover over this, which is the copy pose button. And now I'm going to press this one, which will flip the pose. And thus now the right hand will be affected. And it will copy the same pose. But this time I want to have this going in the opposite direction. Because when the right leg is in front, when the right leg is in front, the right hand goes back. So that's about good. Okay, so from a side view, that's good. I think that should be right. Now let's work with it from the front view. So from the front view, we want to probably have the legs rotated in that direction, and this leg rotated in that direction. This is probably a bit of a lesson to learn. Usually when you're doing male, masculine type of characters, you probably want to have the legs further apart, like that. And when you're doing female characters, you want to have the legs, like, you know, if that's the center line there, you want to put it a little bit closer to it. Or for exaggerated effect, you can go beyond it. Like so, if I can just select it like that, because you create a sense of catwalk. But since our character is male, instead of just creating a generic walk cycle, it's gonna be around halfway, something like that, which is more realistic, I guess. Not too macho, not too feminine. With the body, what you want to do is, see, you want to have the hip. Now what you want to do is you want to have the hips rotate in the opposite direction of where the front leg is facing. So a little, not too much, just a little bit, subtle. And obviously over here, the chest, you want it to be in the other direction, opposite direction. You can go a little bit overboard and exaggerate it. That might create a more cartoony effect, but since I'm creating a simple walk cycle, I'm just going to stick with that. Alright. Of course, this leg has most of the weight pretty much on it. So what you want to do is you want to pretty much rotate the hips like that. So it looks like most of his weight is leaning on the front leg. So if I just rotate like that, it now looks like most of his weight is now leaning on the front leg. And if you lean in that direction, the spine has to always lean in the opposite direction. It's just something that I've learnt. So that creates a more appealing looking walk cycle. And now our contact pose looks a lot more appealing. Alright, that's cool. So maybe we can go ahead and obviously these fingers look a bit fake. I guess this is one of the errors that newer animators tend to make. They tend to leave the fingers flat out straight. This tends to look robotic. It always looks better when it's bent slightly. That's why I bent this arm at the beginning a little bit. Didn't keep it straight because generally when it looks straight, it looks a bit rigid. It looks robotic. So you want to make sure everything bends a little bit because it tends to give that more organic feel. So if I just like that, see, that tends to look much better. The hands. Oh, actually just oops. Oh, sorry. See that, and just separate out a bit. See, that tends to look much better than a pose like that, which is just robotic and probably looks a little bit silly. This is obviously something that I've learnt over time. I've actually created films where I left the fingers flat out like that, and people have told me that it looked a bit weird. So that's something that I've learned to change now. I've tried to add bends and things like that so that my characters look more organic. Okay, that's cool. I guess the head, you can, I don't know, the head can be sort of optional, I guess. Well, I guess if this is going this direction, the head can go in this direction. Or it sort of depends, whatever you want. Try to keep it within line. And obviously rotating back in this direction, because we rotated the spine in that direction. We want to rotate the head in that direction. So keep it opposite. Alright, and obviously you want an exaggerated effect, you can go a little bit further like that. And obviously when you do the animation, his head will bob around. So that might be a nice cartoony effect. So that's our contact pose. That's pretty much it. So just to recap the contact pose, this is pretty much the only thing you need to memorize. These 2 feet need to be at its furthest apart. The back feet needs to be almost straight. The toe needs to be raised. What's it called? Not the toe, the heel, sorry. The heel needs to be raised. And here, the toe needs to be raised, the front foot. And the leg can be a little bit bent. In terms of the hands have to swing in the opposite direction of the legs. So just remember that. And add a little bit of bending to make it look more natural. Also bending in the fingers. The hips need to bend in the direction where the leg, sorry, I don't know how to say this. Sorry, the hips need to bend in the direction so that the front leg has more weight, and you need to rotate it along the Z axis a little bit away from the front leg. The spine obviously rotates in the opposite direction, and yeah, just pretty much in the opposite direction to where you move the hips. So on the Z axis, the opposite way, and also you want to make it rotated downwards. The shoulders. Make sure your shoulders look realistic as well. So I'm just going to support the motion and go RZ by making the shoulders come out. If you add a little bit more movement in the shoulders, it tends to look more organic. Don't keep the shoulders stiff. In character animation, it's best that you move every single muscle. When you move every single muscle in the body, it tends to look more organic. When you tend to keep one or like some of the muscles just stuck in its place, it tends to look robotic. That's another thing that I've learned the hard way. Alright, so Now that we have all our main poses there, we can now create a keyframe for everything. So to do that, I'm just going to press I. See, I didn't have to select any specific control. It's created every single key for me. And that is the magic of the whole character keying set. I pretty much have a key for everything. So that's convenient. Alright, based on timing and the fact that I've done it a lot, I know that at frame 24, I need to have the same pose again. That's the walk cycle. You start with one pose and then you do the cycle and you end up with the same pose again. So I pretty much have to duplicate the same pose over here. So I just press I again, and that same pose is duplicated. If you don't like the timing of frame 24, you can just use reference video and get the exact timing you want based on your reference video, but I'm just choosing 24 because it looks the most realistic. Okay, at frame 12, exactly halfway, you want to have the contact pose now flipped. So how do we do that? Okay, so what you do is you select every single control like that. I'm not going to select the root, and I don't think I even need to select the face as well. That'll be pointless. But everything else I need to select, I think. I don't need to, but actually I need to select, I think. Okay, so obviously you do the same way you do with the hands. You press this, you press the copy buffer button, and then you press the paste flipped button, and there you go. The paste flipped button has flipped the pose for us, so we don't have to recreate this pose again. How convenient is that? So I hit I again and we have our flipped pose. So if you have a look at our walk cycle now, it doesn't look good, it just looks horrible. Nevertheless, the reason for that is because we still haven't created all our key poses. So if this was our pose to pose principle, we have pretty much done the first pass, which is a very, very basic first pass. Now I want to go in and create a second pass. So for the second pass, I want to create the passing pose. So it'll be about halfway, I guess. So we'll go to frame 6, frame 12, frame 6, and we will now create the passing pose. So now we're up to the passing pose. So in the passing pose, the legs are pretty much in line with each other. So let's go ahead and create that pose. So the first thing you want to do is with the front leg, you want to get rid of all the rotations in the heel and the toe. So make sure it's flat on the ground. Great. And with the back leg, you want to also get rid of that rotation of the heel. But what you want to do now is, if I go to side view, I'm going to pull it up so that the thigh is just going over the front leg, and then I'm just going to rotate the leg like so. Now, a common mistake is for new users is they tend to put like in the passing pose, they tend to put the leg too high up. That tends to be unrealistic. It's better to make sure that the toe is almost touching the ground, because if you watch a real life walk cycle and observe a passing pose, you'll notice that people's legs don't go so high up. They almost scrape the ground. So make sure you don't go too high up and just stick to something around there. That should be good enough. I guess because the animation you can exaggerate that a bit more, but yeah, I mean, depending on how cartoony you want it, you can choose that distance. More cartoony, go higher. More realistic, tend to stay a little bit lower. Alright, and yep, so that looks alright. Cool. And yeah, also with the passing pose, make sure that the torso is raised, so the body has to bob up, because you raise it to the point where the front leg isn't bending too much, it's almost straight. Well, it's actually not almost straight, it's pretty much straight. The reason why I don't want to make the legs go fully straight is because with IK it adds a lot of stretching like that. Well, I'm using an older rig here, but it generally tends to add a lot of stretching, and that tends to create these weird popping effects. I think you'll have to use it for yourself to understand what I'm talking about. But generally, I almost go for straight, not fully straight, but like almost straight, like that, so that I don't create those weird popping. So we don't create that weird popping kind of effect. Alright, at this point, you want to make sure that the hands are pretty much in line with the body. Cool. And the head is also in line. The torso is in line. And yeah, everything else is pretty much in line. That's good. I think that's pretty much the passing pose. Easy as that. So let's create a key for the passing pose. There we go. And obviously we need to revert that pose onto this side. So select everything. Don't select the face. And don't select the root. I'm gonna copy that pose. Go over here. And I think 18 is the midway point, is it? 12, 24. 24 minus 12 is 12, it's 18. Okay, and then I'm going to paste this flipped. So now I'll hit I, and I'll create a key for everything. And that is pretty much the passing pose. So let's just quickly have a look at our walk cycle now. Alright, a little bit better. It's starting to look like a real walk cycle now. Great. Okay, so let me just quickly recap our passing pose before we get onto our next pose. So for the passing pose, it's quite simple. Both the legs have to be almost in line with one another. The back leg's thigh has to be a little bit in front of the front leg's thigh. Don't put the back leg too high up. Put it just a little bit higher up, like it's almost scraping. Tends to create a more realistic effect. Pull the hip, sorry, not the hips. Pull the torso up, and pull the arms pretty much in line with the body, and that's it. The hips and the spine can pretty much rotate in front direction, and that should be good enough. Okay, that's it. So now let's go to the third pass, which is the low pose. The low pose is pretty much the part of the walk cycle where the body is at its lowest point. So I can go halfway of 6, which is 3, but I'm just gonna add a little bit more delay and go to 4. Anyways, so at the low pose, the head and the hips are pretty much at their lowest point. So at this point, you need to make sure that the front leg, so let me have a look at the beginning. Yeah, the front leg needs to already plop back into position. So to create that low pose, I'm going to pull that torso down a little bit. Again, it depends on what type of style you're going for. Cartoony, you go way down. Realistic, you go up. I guess I'm teaching you guys how to create different styles of walk cycles in this tutorial as well. But I guess we'll do a more stylized walk cycle in the next tutorial. But yeah, just giving you some ideas. All right, so cool. The head is pretty much low as well. The head's pretty much low. So that's all I did. Just move the torso down and change that. Actually, sorry. No, I want it, because it's near towards the passing pose, I want to go front and go almost like the passing pose. But don't go too much like that, because it's sort of out of bounds. Like if I put the leg like that, this part of the body looks like it'll fall over backwards. And when you do realistic, when you observe real life physics, you don't want to have the body out of balance like that. It tends to look bad. You want to balance things out. So if the body is there, if the center of gravity is there, I don't know how to, I'm not exactly good at physics, but if the center of gravity is there, you want to make sure that you balance it out like that. Okay, so you just rotate like that. That's about it. So just to recap what I did for the passing pose is I pretty much got rid of that rotation, made it flat on the floor, the leg, push this leg closer to the passing pose, and pull this torso down. That's it. So just to recap what I did for the passing pose, I got rid of this rotation, I pushed the back foot closer to the passing pose, and I push this torso down. That's about it. I guess what I can do over here in the low pose is, yeah, I think that should be it. That should be it. Maybe I can go a little bit back here. All right. So, okay, now I'm going to show you another way of copying pose rather than just doing copy paste. So I'm just going to locate where the next low pose is going to be. So it's obviously going to be here. So if you want to copy it, I don't have to go copy, select everything, copy, and then paste. I can select the dope sheet summary. If you see this here, says this orange part, dope sheet summary. This summary is pretty much shows the keyframe for all this data here. So for example, if I want to select the keyframe for the keyframe for chest like that, then I can move it, I can duplicate it and do whatever I want with it. But if I want to select everything, usually you can box select like that and select a few keyframes at once, or just use a dope sheet summary and just select all the key in that line. So I want to do that so basically that's how I'm going to duplicate the low pose. So here is the low pose I just created. Right click that at the highest, the dope sheet summary. So I'll select all the keys for that body. Shift D and move it to this position here. Okay, so obviously we need to invert it because it's odd. So to invert it, I'm just going to go like the normal way. Copy. Select everything except this. And it's no difference. We could do the other way like we did before, but I just want to show you that there's different ways of copying poses. This is not the only way. So we'll just copy and invert that pose. Alright, so let's have a look at our animation now. Ah, no, it didn't work. Okay, let me just do that again. Alright. And let's get rid of the face. I don't know what went wrong. Okay, so copy and invert the pose. Alright. I think it's I forgot to press. It should create the keyframe, but okay. Alt A, and there we go. It's starting to look good. Alright. I think it actually might be better if I move back to the halfway so that for the sake of this tutorial it looks more organized. Actually, what's going on? Grab. Oh, okay. Right. Yeah, that looks better actually. I don't know, before I worked on a walk cycle and I found that putting it halfway didn't seem to work. But okay. Anyways, that looks better for a simple walk cycle anyways. Alright, cool. Next, we're going to create the high pose, which will pretty much end the walk cycle. So with the high pose, you pretty much have the torso and the head at its highest point. So we're going to go ahead and create that. So all I'm going to do is move this up the Z-axis towards its highest point. Okay, sorry, just make sure it's subtle. And yep, that's cool. You can probably start to pose this up like that. So for the highest point, you can maybe pose this up like that. Sorry, I haven't done walk cycles in a while now. Okay, that's probably better. I'm just going to enable automatic keyframe insertion so that I don't have to keep pressing I all the time. Can we move it even higher? But doing so, make sure that I rotate this. Not too high. I guess that is a little too high. Maybe I'm gonna move this a little closer here. And maybe move this a little lower. Move this down. Okay. Let's have a look at that. I think that's good. So I'm just going to copy this for a second. So unselect that. B, middle click to unselect that. This side, copy. And how do I find out? So this is a high pose, contact pose, passing pose is this one, and reverse select. Okay, so that adjusts that. Cool. So now I select this pose, I copy that pose, and now I go about halfway, a little less, and I invert that. And now I hit I. Alright. So what I did there is, here's a passing pose. I went about halfway and went one frame back. I copied the high pose and just applied it here. Pretty much the same thing. Okay, so if I play back the entire animation, that's looking good. Just, I forgot one more thing. To recap what I did for the high pose, sorry, is I moved the hips and the head up. I moved this front foot a little bit forward, a little bit closer to the final destination, I guess. Oh, sorry, it's going backwards. I might move that back, actually. Alright, you don't want to come backwards like that. Okay, anyways, I might just copy that over here. Oh, sorry, I might copy, paste inverse. Alright, cool. And that's it. So if I just go to frame 24 and end that, sorry, if I just ended at frame 24 and now play back the animation, you can see our walk cycle. Cool. That is a very, very simple walk cycle. How cool does that look? Alright. Anyways, there's a few things we can do to make it better, even better than we have it now. We can go ahead and start to refine our poses. So a bit of that key shuffling technique that I talked about in the how to approach character animation video that I did, the tutorial that I did earlier. So what we want to do is we want to snap the leg one frame after the front leg. I want this front leg here to snap down flat on the ground one frame after. So maybe just Alt R, bang. So when he walks, it just plops his feet down. So that's good. And do the same for this side of the feet. After it makes his walk, one frame down. I don't want to like take 3 or 4 frames to plop down. I want to go immediately down, because when we stamp our foot on the ground, we don't take a few frames to do that. We can't do that almost instantaneously. If you observe some reference footage, you might see how quick you plop your foot down. So Alt R will do that. I'm not gonna add keyframes for everything, because now I'm sort of polishing it. So that's good. So that looks better. Our walk cycle looks much improved now. And that's pretty much it for the basic walk cycle. Alright, so I'm just gonna quickly mention one more thing in terms of the poses, in terms of just normal character animation principles, and the how to approach character animation video that I did earlier. You can see that what I mean by the organized keyframe technique that I was talking about, that Keith Lango also mentioned in his tutorials. You have very, very organized keyframes here. So if I want to change the timing of something, like say I don't like the timing of the high pose, I wanted to I want the body to sort of come up a little later, then I can just select all the keyframes in an orderly fashion, and then just move them like so, and adjust the timing easily. And all the poses for that timing will move accordingly. Now, when I add keyframes like these ones, it suddenly adds a bit more complexity, and I have to keep moving a couple keyframes. I mean, this is probably simple, but I'm saying if I say I move this keyframe, or I delete, if I delete this keyframe, it suddenly adds a lot more complexity when everything starts to shuffle up, and it tends to add a lot more, noise. Adjusting timing starts to become a bit of a pain. So it's good earlier on in your first few passes of blocking out your animation that you have very organized keyframes. That way, you can adjust timing and poses very easily without much of a hassle. Only once you're happy with your poses and you're completely set that, wow, this character, wow, I'm happy with this character animation, that's when you can pretty much go in and pretty much ruin up, mess up your keyframes and add a lot more, style and things like that to it. But you gotta first be sure that your keyframes, that your pose and your timing is set in stone. So yeah, that's pretty much what I want to show you in this tutorial, how to create a basic walk cycle. Yep. So while we're at it, I'm just gonna save this as a walk cycle. While we're at it, I'm just gonna show you a different way to create a walk. I want to show you a technique that I used before to create my walk cycles, and that you can use yourself in your animations, and why it's probably not a good idea. I'm just gonna go ahead and just enable that so that you only see the armature animation, not any other animation data. So what I did there is I went to the NLA editor, and what we can see is we can see our simple walk cycle animation data there. And now what I'm going to just do is I'm just going to hit that this Christmas tree decoration thing, and what that'll do is you can see your character animation data there. So what you can do is, if I just extend the animation to say 250 frames long or something like that, if I play the animation now, you'll find that it stops. So you can sort of treat this a little bit like a video editing strip. So what you can do is you can repeat that animation. So since it's a walk cycle, it is always going to cycle again and again and again. So you can repeat that, say 5 times. So will that end in, maybe 10 times, and that'll probably create our full walk cycle for this video. 231, good enough. Let's end it at 230. So if you play back now, you pretty much have a walk cycle that repeats for 10 times. And that's not all you can do with it. You can now create animation on top of that. So if I create a new action, so by the way, when you go to Dope Sheet for a second and go to Action Editor, you'll find that your simple animation walk cycle is gone now, because you pretty much applied, once you apply that to a non-linear animation editor, it's pretty much gone from the actual action editor. So now when you create a new action, you can pretty much create an action on top of the non-linear editor action. Anything that you create on top of the non-linear action editor will override what's in the non-linear editor. That sounds way too confusing. So basically what I do, like right now, if I animate, say, waving hands, and I take this hand and I create a waving, oh hello, what that'll do is you'll have your walk cycle, and the hands will sway from side to side, but then suddenly when you have your waving hands, that will override the animation of the walk cycle, and your hands will then wave while the legs are moving, if that makes sense. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to say move. I don't know, I haven't got an idea. Anyways, so I can move it. So I hit G and just create a keyframe for the root. Go to 230 and grab Y, move it a bit like there, or something like there. Grab, that's good enough. Also just change the vector, press V vector. What that'll do is, with Blender's animation, you start slow and then it goes fast and then ends slow again. So by doing vector, the animation is constant. I'm sure there's, I think I've mentioned that in the previous tutorial, but yeah, that's just hit vector. And there you can see that. So now when I go into the NLA editor, you can see that there's a move action on top of the NLA track. So now we'll have both the move animation and the simple walk cycle animation as well. If I had to create another action editor, like if I hit that Christmas button again and then go back to the Dope Sheet editor, it's gone again. And if I create a new one called, say, waving hands, for instance, and then I go into the NLA editor, this action will then supersede or override the walk cycle. So for example, if I created I don't know, let's just go here in here, and at frame 60 I wanted to wave his hand like so. I'm just gonna do a quick wave like hello. That's a horrible animation, I know. Okay, so you have your waving hand animation like that. So you can see that, and then if I go into the NLA editor and I enable that, now you can see, look at the hands. The hands will, so now if I play back the animation, you'll notice that the hands sway from side to side, and suddenly it's waving. And you can create interesting animation that way. Obviously, what it starts abruptly. It starts abruptly, so you can obviously adjust that. Like adding an auto blend. It starts quite abruptly over here, so you can obviously adjust that by blend in, blend out. Say blend in by 5 frames and blend out by 5 frames. And now if you play it, you'll see that it blends in and it's not as abrupt. So you can create, you know, dynamic type of animations that way. I have to admit something, this is how I used to create walk cycles for my films, my earlier films especially. I used to create a walk cycle, repeat it a few times, create a move action, and move the entire rig, and any other actions like waving hands or I don't know, some other expressions or something like that. I created action on top of that. The drawback of using the NLA editor for walk cycles is sliding feet, and I think I showed you a few examples earlier in my tutorial videos of problems I used to have in my earlier films with the sliding feet problem. The problem with the move action is you will need to calculate the exact location, say from this point here to this point, and then try to create an animation that minimizes that move. You can actually get rid of that sliding feet problem by if you calculate the distance from here to here, and then create a keyframe and then repeat that move. And once you create the distance, then you create a keyframe that sort of adjusts to that, and then somehow the sliding feet problem will just go away. What I pretty much did is I didn't really bother with much with the math. I just adjusted the, like for example, I'll go here, and if it's not far enough, then sorry, I created a keyframe there by accident. Like if it wasn't far enough, what I did is I just if it slides too much, then I move it forward. If it slides too less, then I move it backwards. And I sort of fluked it that way. But really, when you do high quality animations, like such as if you want to do animation for a film or something, it's probably better not to use the NLA editor, and it's probably better to animate it in scene. So I'll show you that technique in the next video. This technique is much better for more realistic character animations and to really showcase your kind of talent. So I'll be showing that in the next video. So thank you for watching this video. I hope you found this video helpful. As usual, please comment, subscribe, like, and all that other stuff.